Going to the captive audience. It is the 4th of September, Monday. Yes, the first Monday. It is Labor Day, and a high holy holiday for the most part on the Democrat Party calendar. They hold picnics and various activities where they talk about how great unions have been for the country, and they give us the day off so that we don't have to listen to them. But and I'm here with the other Kevin Hoare, David Darnell.
David Darnell became Kevin Hoare.
Well, we just copy and paste around here, but yeah, we're here coming to you on Labor Day, and I want to plug something. Tomorrow, we were going to try to have him today, but he couldn't make it, so we're going to have him tomorrow. Is Aaron Wyth. He is the CEO of the Freedom Foundation. He started out here in Oregon, and now he's the National Freedom Foundation CEO, and they're making a massive difference in helping people leave public employee unions, particularly teachers unions, and withdraw their political contributions from going to those organizations. And he's going to come on tomorrow. He has a book that really kind of captures the spirit of the Freedom Foundation. The title of the book is Freedom is the Foundation, How We Are Defeating Progressive Tyranny by Taking on Government Unions. And so he's going to talk about his book. He's going to talk about the work they're doing and the state of unions in this country and what we can do, because obviously Oregon is one of those states it's literally run by public employee unions, at least the government. Yeah. And it's had a huge effect.
It's not just public employee unions. The IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, which I was a member of for 10 years, is consistently either the first or the second top contributor nationwide to Democrat campaigns.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And so between the government unions and some of the private sector unions, this is the way the Democrat Party actually managed to function and control and dominate politics in many states, and to hold on to power in places you think they shouldn't be able to. And so tune in tomorrow. Aaron, I posted the link to his book. I posted the link to the Freedom Foundation where you can read about him, and watch for that tomorrow at 6 o'clock, captive audience. Well,
President Biden was celebrating union jobs today with a tweet. He said that he celebrates good family wage earning jobs, and those are union jobs. And my thought was, well, only 8% of the jobs in America are union jobs. What about the other 92% of people? Are they not celebratable? Well, are we the unimportant labor?
Exactly, the unimportant labor. Maybe he'd be fine if there was 92% unemployment, and because this doesn't matter, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I do think that that Joe Biden has actually never worked in a real job, so he doesn't know anything about this topic other than the fact that these unions have made it possible for somebody who has no brain to continue to run for office and attain an office, including the highest office in government in the world, the presidency of the United States. And he's right; it could not be done without labor support.
Yeah. Well, my take on the whole labor movement, everybody celebrates the labor movement on Labor Day, like the labor movement is 8% of union jobs are the only people that labor have jobs. But my whole take on this labor union is, as it's celebrated, is it's straight out of the Marx playbook. It's and it always has been. I often hear people say, there was a time when unions were needed in America. Nah, they were never needed in America. They're just straight up Marxism. Well, you can thank your 40-hour work week for unions. Well, what about if I want to make more money and work 60 hours a week? You know,
Yeah.
you guys screwed that up with overtime pay, and you screwed up the ability to be productive with all of this legislation that you passed. Children can no longer work, so they're 18, 19, 20, 22 years old before they figure out how to work. And yeah, I don't think labor unions did anything for this country of note.
Well, and it's safe to say that that if you have a willing employer and a willing employee, and they want to work a longer time, the labor unions have only made that harder for those two willing groups in an economy to do what they want to do.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
how does that make sense?
If I want to work, as a self-employed individual, I've always had the option to work as many hours as I want, and I can charge whatever I want to for those hours. I can charge the same. I could charge less if I wanted, but I mean, I can work. If I'm selling my time, and a lot of people have jobs in which they sell their time. I do not recommend it, by the way. It's a horrible way to make money, but if I'm selling my time, I should be allowed the freedom to sell my time, as much of my time as I so desire, and contiguously or consecutively or for any duration at any rate. And we can thank the unions in America for people not being able to do that anymore.
Well, and actually for backing things like a rapidly increasing minimum wage,
Mm-hmm.
which actually just makes people that have the hardest time getting a job being able to get someone to hire them. Because if you just keep raising the cost of that person, at some point, it doesn't make sense to hire them if they just don't have the skill and ability yet.
No.
So entry-level people into the workforce struggle because of the policies unions have backed. And that's just the labor policies. They actually back an entire set of radical leftist progressive socialist policies that, by the way, have nothing to do with labor.
No, killing unborn children has nothing to do with furthering the cause of people that work, except for the fact that it shrinks the labor pool significantly. I mean, there's 70 million people in America that never got the chance to work.
Yeah. Yep. And on top of that, they back things like gender surgeries and all kinds of stuff that I just don't see how that has anything to do with the core purpose of a labor union, which is why people have at least been trying to make sure that they removed their political contribution portion of their union dues. And I see Nicholas Middleton, he asked a question there. I don't have the answer to that, but that's a good question for us to ask Aaron with tomorrow night. We will do that. So I'll keep your question ready, and we will definitely ask him and then talk about what that means when unions can no longer count on that slush fund that they force out of people. But here's a great way to start as far as stories today. Here's a headline over the weekend. Oregon Employment Department, speaking of labor, the hold times are soaring when you call the Oregon Employment Department, despite record low unemployment. So they have technically less people that should be calling them because they normally get activity in business when there's higher unemployment. But they have found a way to screw that up anyway. And they've actually gone back to people who they think the Oregon Employment Department might have overpaid back in 2020 with benefits that they still took months and months to dispense anyway. And now they're going back to these folks and handing them, in the case of Sophie Wolf, who was laid off in June and promptly filed for unemployment aid while starting a new job. She got word her application had been approved. She watched her mail in anticipation of benefit checks. And she said she got a $2,700 bill from the Oregon Employment Department because it said that they overpaid her for pandemic era employment assistance and wanted the money back. She said she was devastated, broke down in tears, had no idea what she was going to do because these people that are supposed to help you, all they did is end up sending you a bill. And she said she and her fiance had been planning a wedding. They don't know if they're going to do that now. Certainly, the government doesn't want them to get married, and they don't know how they're going to cover their rent. However, she called the unemployment department seeking an explanation and ran into a pandemic-era throwback. She had to wait on the phone for 2 hours until it was 5 p.m., at which point she figured no one was probably going to be in a government office to take her call. And
no one was in an office.
Say that again?
No, there was no one in the office. Guarantee you that. I mean,
oh no, she's right. You know, so they just had that like flashing light on the phone sitting there, like, oh, it flashes all the time. That means somebody's waiting on the phone. I don't have time for that. Plus, I got to get out of here. It's happy hour, you know. So, despite the fact that they should be able to cope with a record low unemployment situation, the Oregon Employment Department apparently doesn't know how to do anything right. And now at least 20% of the people who call have to wait for at least half an hour, and some like Ms. Wolf here for hours. And so that is your government at work celebrating Labor Day with record incompetence. And they don't stop there, because this same state government, they for a long time during COVID, they had a reimbursement policy where they would reimburse people who were living outside of Oregon that were state employees for the cost of traveling back to the state for different work purposes. Because a lot of people during the pandemic, they just moved out of Oregon, but they kept their jobs and they worked remotely, and they got reimbursed for coming back eventually for meetings and stuff like that. They stopped that policy, but apparently state employees still don't want to come back. and so the problem is continuing. They stopped the reimbursements on the 1st of September, and there's just loads of people who apparently have no plans to return.
Yeah. Well, that's been an ongoing story. I know that it's a big deal in Portland because Portland businesses rely on people that work in the offices, and the offices are empty. The state offices are empty because everybody's working from home. Now, I'm not so sure. I mean, if I were governor and I was in charge of these agencies, I would probably encourage people to work from home, and I would probably get rid of the leases and get rid of the public buildings.
Oh yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would do. People are bitching about it. You should be in your office. Well, you know what? I mean, if they can get their job done, if you have a feedback loop and the metrics are good and the numbers are being met and the service, level is either adequate or increasing, then I would keep people working from home. That's what I would do.
Yeah, use it as a cost cutting opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that if they don't like it, then I guess the Oregon Employment Department could use some help. They could do that job remotely, because apparently they can't find any human beings that are currently employed there to answer phones after 2 hours of people calling and trying to find out what happened to their benefit / bill that they were handed. This is the problem. They don't solve problems. They create them, and then they.
Well, yeah. I mean, every time we come across one of these stories, Kevin, it just reinforces the fact that no one in the executive branch of Oregon, regardless of what their name is, apparently for some years now, is paying attention. No one's minding the store. No one is making these agencies work. No one is taking any kind of management steps to increase their effectiveness and lower their cost. It's like, every time there's a problem or anytime anything's, out of the ordinary, and now it's not even out of the ordinary. There's just no one. I mean, how can you be CEO of a state like Oregon and put up with this crap? I mean, why don't you call that person into your office and say, you need to fix this. If you can't fix this, you're fired. And we'll take second in command. And if they can't fix it, we'll fire them too. I mean, that's the way you do it.
Well, as I understand it, and I'd have to double check this, but I seem to remember about a week or two ago, the person who was brought in to fix and did reduce wait times for people getting responses from the employment department back in 2020, she's been promoted. So that's I know this is what government does. They promote the incompetence. And then, of course, if you add in the fact that the public employee unions have made it almost impossible to fire people further down in the bureaucracy for incompetence, this is not going to be fixed. Plus, those public employee unions participate actively in electing the people who are at the top of these bureaucracies, such as the governor.
Yeah.
So that's like electing somebody who's not going to hold you accountable. That's it. It's just a waste. It's a complete waste.
It is. And people need to know that this falls squarely on the shoulders of the person running the executive branch of Oregon. Okay, that's their job, is to manage these things. It's not their job to legislate. It's not their job to promise free shit for people. It's not their job, to wear a cowboy hat backwards and be in a parade. It's their job to manage the agencies that we are paying for. And they're not doing it. They're not doing. I mean, the DMV, the Employment Department, OHA. How many of these things? How hard is it to call everybody into your office and say, we need to fix this? And if you can't fix it, I understand. We'll find someone who can. It can't be that hard, but there's no will. Someone said here, they don't care. I think it was Marjorie said, they don't listen. They don't care. It doesn't matter. It does not matter whether or not people have to wait 3 months during a planned pandemic to get an unemployment check after being forced to relinquish their job and stay home. I can't imagine the kind of havoc that caused people. We talked about it, but can you imagine the tens of thousands of people in the state of Oregon, what that did to their finances? I mean, a lot of people don't have but their paycheck to pay for their lives. And when they're 3 months behind on getting a replacement for the paycheck, that's just unacceptable. They don't care. Kotek doesn't care. Brown doesn't care. Nobody cares in government.
What they do care about is making sure that people from other states can come and get free abortions here. And they also want to make sure that if you're...
Can't leave those babies living.
And if you're a minor, that you can have your genitals removed and replaced with some robotic surgeon at OHSU. And so that's what they care about. That's what matters. And if you thought that you mattered, think again. That's the Labor Day lesson that we're going to get here is this. Now, yes. And we also have a point. They love felons too. Yes, they do. They love felons. They love drug addicted urban campers. If they could have like entire cities of drug addicted urban campers, because that would create endless employment opportunities for public unions. It would.
I'm pretty sure they like criminal organizations and drug cartels too, because they sure pass a lot of policy that benefits criminal organizations and drug cartels and human trafficking cartels.
Which are probably more functional employment organizations than the government itself, which is fascinating.
Absolutely.
Very result-oriented. We got to get that fentanyl on the streets now, David.
If you got fentanyl customers that are waiting 2 hours to buy fentanyl, whoever's taking care of that's going to be fired or worse.
Maybe what we should do is take the employment department and just say, look, I don't care. We're just going to grab people off the street and hand them burner phones. The phones are going to ring. We're going to tell them that it's somebody calling for fentanyl, but instead they're actually just trying to get an employment check. The customer service would skyrocket. It would be great. Real results.
Yeah, well, you've heard me say it before. I think when we were talking about the original employment department's difficulty during COVID, getting the checks out, what I said I would do is I would farm that crap out to Amazon. I would call Amazon. I said, look, I got a problem, and this is an information processing problem. Okay, I want you to solve it. And I'm sure it would have been done in 48 hours, you know?
Yeah, and if you had the cartels, you could include them. You could have some, 16-year-old on a Guatemalan on a scooter could just come out and bring you your check. You'd have it in
Yeah.
about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
From all points in the state.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah, they're good at distribution. They can distribute drugs, distribute unemployment checks. I mean, and Amazon's good at that too. Amazon's good at that too. They get stuff out right away. So, but there's just no will. Nobody cares. Nobody, they don't care. It doesn't seem to. It seems like the executive branch in the state of Oregon, and I'm just talking about, the governor and the Secretary of State and all of the appointed bureaucrats, they just don't seem to have any kind of concern over the service that they're supposed to provide. And I don't think government should provide damn near any service personally, but here we are, and we're paying them. We're not getting it.
Well, and they're not customers for these services. They have plenty of money and they're fine. So, as you said, they don't really care. Now, speaking of something that doesn't work and they don't really care, our education system, which is, in the case of the public school system, public employee union run. We'd like to think boards actually run these things, and they have a lot of influence, but most of those influence, again, are those people are elected, and they're dominated by public employee union-backed candidates. And however, it looks like that Oregon is facing what is called a No School November strike. The Portland Public Schools are heading for a massive strike as the year-long negotiations that they've been going through are at an impasse. It looks like the Oregonian is saying that union leaders, school district officials, rank and file educators alike say there's potential for teachers in Portland to follow suit as soon as November 1st, a month when there are already 7 scheduled days off, which wouldn't count against the strike. And so on Thursday, this past Thursday, district negotiators and representatives of the PAT, the Portland Association of Teachers, the union, they met with the first time with the state negotiator, and they've been bargaining for a year, but remain really far apart. Salary, they want to have class size caps. They want to have logistics around job reassignments. They want to say how much time should be set aside for lesson planning, grading, and professional development. But they've asked for a 21.5% raise over 3 years. The district has countered with a 9% raise. That's a pretty far apart number from.
It is.
And they are dismissing this as a salary freeze because, I guess they're being affected by inflation and the high cost of living and rent in the Portland metro area caused really by the policies, Bidenflation, and literally doing helicopter money everywhere for as long as they have. And so in a way, I understand why they're asking for higher wages, but then they're actually going to contribute to inflation as a result of this. There's such a large one. And of course, we're going to have schools that are going to be a lot like waiting for the employment department to answer your phone, except it'll be parents who will have to find a way to keep their kids at home with no place to go to school.
Yeah. Well, I think Lori said it best, a raise for harming kids. So.
Yeah, that's a great
way to do it. Yeah. So I'll take the side of the teachers on this. Your money is worth 20% less than it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody needs a raise. Either that or we need to shrink the money supply and make the dollar worth at least what it was 3 years ago, which I'm not sure can be done without crashing the economy. But again, here we are. We have an industry sector, if you will, in the public domain that increasingly costs more money and increasingly gives less service.
Actually, they do worse than that. They might, because the Portland Public Schools, the very same Portland Public Schools we just talked about that are going to strike, are considering a move to a, quote, equitable grade system, unquote. So while they're talking about, they're actually going to make the education system worse because they say that they want to promote fairness in the classroom. and they're claiming that linguistic inaccuracies and home life hardships must be considered when you are grading work. So, 2 + 2 could be 5 because that's your life experience. And
Yeah,
plus, you're having a hard time. And
who cares? You didn't learn anything. I mean, none of your kids learned anything anymore. I can guarantee, I can attest to that since I hire some of these people. They don't know how to do anything. They don't know anything.
They know that climate change is destroying the planet. They know that.
Yeah, and they know that they don't get paid enough for what they do. And that they should be paid more, and that the employer is taking advantage of them. They know that.
And they know what their pronouns are.
They teach that in school.
Yes.
Yeah, some of them know what their pronouns are, but yeah, I mean, everybody, I think everybody's watched this show before knows what I think of public schools. So,
well, and so they're saying here that in the past, teachers have given zeros if schoolwork was late or inaccurate. They're going to forbid teachers from doing that, so that schoolwork will often be late or inaccurate, and it will not cause people to get bad grades.
Yeah.
And they're saying they
want to. There you go. Problem fixed. There's your metrics. You're hitting your numbers. Everybody's getting A's.
Grades are going up.
Yeah. We need more money. Look at that. Look how well we're doing. Hell, everybody's coming out of 4.0, 3.8, 3.9, 4.0. I think we deserve a raise.
And guess who is promoting these grading systems and all of these changes that water down the education?
Teachers Union?
You got it. Welcome. It's Labor Day. Celebrate. And this is what they're doing. And it's really put, they say they make it clear that the new system would not endorse cheating. But they say that this system will somehow make everybody smarter.
Who needs to cheat if it doesn't matter what you turn in? Or maybe even if you turn in, I mean, there's no need to cheat. The only reason you cheat is because you have to do something. If you don't have to do anything, the hell with it. No, why waste time cheating?
That's yeah. See, they've lowered the need for cheating because it just won't matter what you.
There you go. The metrics are up. Grades are sky high. Cheating is at an all-time low. We need more money because our teachers are heroes.
It's only going to cost you 21.5% more to have.
Our teachers are heroes, Kevin. They're heroes. They need to be celebrated.
That's exactly right. Well, and so Representative Yavati out in Clatsop, he wrote an Oregon Catalyst editorial here. He said that he's spoken with many parents, and they say they are losing faith in our public school system. Said in a recent study of 40 states, Oregon came out with the nation's 4th worst student absenteeism rate, which it's going to get worse with the no zero policy.
Yeah.
36% of Oregon students miss 10% or more of the school year. 10%. Reports have shown that Oregon's test scores are not rebounding post-pandemic. They show that 40% of states' third graders were proficient. Only 40% of the state's third graders were proficient in reading, writing, and math this spring. That's down from 47% in English, 46% in math before the pandemic. That is a major decline.
Third graders that can't read?
And then 8th graders, only 44% achieved proficiency in reading and 26% in math. 26%. Only 1/4 of 8th graders were proficient in math. Yeah. That is down from 53% and 38% respectively in 2019.
Wow.
And we're looking up at states like Mississippi, which historically had poor achievement. Remember, we used to always talk about, Mississippi, they're, they have the kids that don't get the good education. Nope, that's Oregon now.
Yeah, that is Oregon. And at what cost? $18,000 a kid? $19,000 a kid?
Yep. And they want to increase the cost of the teachers by 21.5%. So that number is going to go way up. It's going to go up. And we're going to get less for it. We are getting less for it. That's proven. and the kids that are falling behind are just simply not going to be catching up this way. They're going to be just socially promoted out the door as high school graduates, with the inability to do things like function in a business or get into a college, read, write, do math. Yes. And now there is a program that's supposed to help that he talks about here, an early childhood literacy package, which you think you wouldn't need a special government package to enhance early childhood literacy, when the point of educating children early childhood is to achieve literacy. So apparently what we didn't have was enough money to make sure that they do what they were supposed to already be doing.
Yeah. Literacy package will fix that. And what the literacy package does not fix, equity grading will.
Yes. No, that's right. Because we're going to make that easier to get a 0 and
you can read.
Yep. Wow. So he's pointing this out. He's saying parents are unhappy. Look, folks, the only way this is going to get fixed is if you stop letting the teachers unions run the education system and parents take it back. There are various ways this is going to happen. I hope it happens sooner versus later. Some of it means empowering parents to go and take the money we just talked about and go where they need to go.
And you know what else? And maybe you can ask Aaron about this. I don't know if this is, I don't think it's quite Aaron's thing, but this is what needs to happen. Some school district somewhere needs to be the first school district to decertify the teachers union.
That would do it. And the teachers union would go nuts. They go ballistic.
Oh, it would be front page news across the nation, because that's their first line. That's their front line. That's their Western Front, is the school system for far left progressives. And they know that. I mean, that's why it's such a that's why school board races have become so nasty in the last several years, is because they can't lose the schools. But someone needs to take over a school board, and they need to find a way to say goodbye to a teachers union so that everybody else can stand up and say, we're going to have a non-union school.
Yeah. And we're going to actually make sure that performance comes first. Money gets spent that produces performance. If we don't get performance, then you don't get to keep your job, and we move on, find someone else and do it another way. Eventually, they also have to introduce enough choice in education so that the public system will be forced to compete openly with private options. And that ultimately can lead to a lot of folks really getting a real education for the first time for the money they spend. So stay tuned, because I think that there's going to be more of this attention and focus here within the next year. That's the only way it's going to get reversed. Now, we've all been experiencing how government has managed wildfires. And I think you were discussing before that maybe you thought that your internet was being inhibited by tufts of ash on your satellite dish.
Yeah, it most likely is, because like I was saying before the show, I wasn't freezing up as much as I am now after the fire started. So yeah, there's a lot of ash that gets dumped by wildfires. Wildfires, in my opinion, are mostly preventable. I've had this discussion on Twitter with tens and tens of thousands of viewers, and it's the fuel loads in unmanaged forests that cause these mega fires. And some time ago, I made just a little case study. Well, it was July 15th. So 2 fires started on July 15th. There was the 2-2 fire outside of Estacada, and there was the Flat fire northwest of Grants Pass. The Flat fire was finally contained at about 35,000 acres. It's not even actually contained. It's about 60% contained right now. And the 224 fire was contained at 40 acres and put out within a matter of days. Now, if you look at the overhead shot of the 224 fire outside of Estacada, it was blazing in managed and reforested forests with clear, open roads, easy access, and no excess fuel. And it was contained at 40 acres. The flat fire, which started the same day, had 2,000 people. They were spending $2 million a day on that fire for 50 days, grew to 35,000 acres.
And as you said, preventable.
It is preventable.
Yeah, because it's funny. It's also funny how forest fires, wildfires, all seem to know where the unmanaged forests and the federal land are. That's an amazing thing. Fire is really smart, and it knows how to find those places and avoid the places that are managed. I wonder why that is. But Nick Smith,
I think it just knows that if it tries to go in those managed forests, it's just going to die. It's suicide. Managed forest is suicide for fires.
That's exactly right. Now, Nick Smith, who's the executive director for a group called Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization supporting active forest management on federal land. So they're campaigning and pressing for that. And he's also the public affairs director for the American Forest Resource Council, which is representing the forest sector in the Pacific Northwest. And he says exactly what you said here. He said that while we can't prevent heat waves or windstorms, we have the ability to actively manage our forests before, during, and after the fires to reduce the risks and break the cycle of wildfires.
Even after,
it's not happening on a scale that's necessary. And here's the statistic that stood out to me the most. You talked about the Oregon's 2020 Labor Day fires. He said, for example, it's no coincidence that this year's wildfires are burning through hundreds of thousands of dead trees we've chosen to leave on these landscapes after past fires. He said, for example, following the Oregon 2020 Labor Day fires, the federal government removed dead and dying trees from less than 2% of the fire's footprint. 2%.
Yeah.
That is not managed.
No, it is not. And we had our 2020 fire was the Slater. It was fast moving, just like all the ones up north, all up and down the I-5 corridor. So the Slater burned hot. We had the high winds, burned hot, moved fast. Everybody thought we were all going to die. There's dead forest as far as you can see. I think it's USF. I think it's Forest Service property. So they went and started logging hazard trees. And hazard trees are the trees next to the road, right? And they log them because they are hazardous. They will fall over and they could fall on people. So they went in at a feverish pace to get rid of these hazard logs. And I think
Oh, I think your satellite dish is getting hit by the ass there.
They went, what's that?
Oh, you froze up there for a second.
Oh, did I? Where'd I leave off?
You were talking about the hazard logs.
Yeah, so the U.S. Forest Service was sued by a handful of environmental organizations to stop the hazard logging, to stop the burn logging, hazard logging. They sue to stop any cutting. They sue to stop any management. And then once there's a forest fire, then they sue to stop the salvage operation. And those people are the people that are responsible. Organizations like KS Wild, Oregon Wild, Cascadia Wildlands, the Conservancy, Oregon Conservancy, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of them. Those are the people that are causing these fires because they are stopping the sale, the salvage, and even the hazard logging in Oregon's forests with lawsuits.
And there's actually federal money that's being spent on hazardous fuels reduction, and they're still getting stopped.
Yes, they're stopping it at every. And I've had trolls on Twitter, it's, oh, that's bullshit. No, it's not. Just go to Justia, pick Oregon, pick federal lawsuits, pick environmental, and scroll through, and there's dozens and dozens of lawsuits to stop every single thing that happens. So, the federal, both the Forest Service and the BLM, the ONC lands, they are trying to sell timber, which is the best way to manage. Because number one, it doesn't cost you money. Yeah, it doesn't cost you money. It actually puts money in your coffers. And two, they clean up, and once the they reforest, and that particular portion of the forest becomes manageable, is now managed. But they sued to stop that, and we're breathing smoke and ash, and all the wildlife are being killed and burnt to death, and the rivers are
releasing CO2. Remember the end of the world CO2? While they're banning our natural gas stoves that don't do any of this kind of stuff to this extent at all, and they're forcing us into electric cars. They actually apparently can't bring themselves to lift a finger to stop all the CO2 emissions from the forest, along with the other ash and stuff that's bad for your respiratory system. They just can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, if you truly believe that CO2 is a pollutant, and I do not, I believe it's the building block of life. But if you truly believe that, you would want to manage our forest, because when that carbon is released, it's a huge amount of carbon that nobody seems to really want to quantify. I'm not sure how many large SUVs you would have to drive around in a circle for however many hours to equal 85,000 acres just this far down the street from me, or the 1 million acres that burned in 2020 in the state of Oregon.
So Congress knows all of this. There was a research report that found in 2022 that the Federal Forest Service treated less than 1% of the National Forest System's lands that are at high risk of severe wildfire. So they know that 99% of the severe risk wildfire areas are not being treated with these hazardous fuel reductions. So, and it takes them years, by the way, to get around to doing this. 3.6 years to begin a mechanical treatment of the forest, 4.7 years to begin prescribed burns to reduce the risk, and so they're just slow.
Yeah,
and all these lands, what is it? 60% of Oregon is federal land. It was put in the hands of the federal government in order to preserve it. This is preserving it?
No, it was put in the hands of the federal government to dispose of it.
Yeah, well, that's what we now know.
It was never meant to be held by the federal government. The Constitution allows for 10 square miles and other needful buildings, not hundreds of millions of acres of Western land rich in natural resources. And that's why they're holding them. The office before the Bureau of Land Management was called the Office of Land Disposal. And it was their job to sell off everything in the West so that it could be used to its greater and greatest and highest good. And I contend that the greatest and highest good for the forests in Oregon that produce 100 billion board feet of lumber a year is to harvest that lumber, because it's sustainable, and to sell that and create economic activity with that.
I've heard that they can grow those things again. Trees,
they grow back miraculously. Yeah, I mean, they'll grow back on your own, even if even if you don't do anything, they'll grow back on their own. But you can, everybody has to reforest when they clear cut. So
persistent little buggers, those trees, huh?
Yeah, they are. They grow well here, and that should be the highest use of our natural resources, and it's not. It's we're being mired up in the courts, primarily because of the Equal Access to Justice Act, which allows these environmental organizations like KS Wild, Oregon Wild, Cascadia Wildlands to sue the federal government for not doing what they're supposed to do, and they get them on some technicality, and then they bill $700 to $750 an hour for their $100 an hour lawyers, because their lawyers are the lawyers that can't get a job in the real world, and that's how they fund their organizations. They fund their organizations from taxpayer money by recovering lawyer fees.
That sounds like some part of the cycle we got to break too. By the way, also, the Oregon Department of Forestry is miring the North Coast timber economy, and something called the Habitat Conservation Plan would devastate that timber economy. Representative Yavati, the same one that we were talking about before on education, he represents Clatsop County, and which is right in the heart of this. And he said on
Yeah.
September 6th and 7th, the Board of Forestry will meet in Salem about this habitat conservation plan. They've indicated there's a willingness to modify the plan to improve harvest outcomes and protect jobs, but they need to hear from the public. And as it turns out, you can read not only this this report about the HCP is what it's called. I'll post that here in the feed, but also you can read this, what the Board of Forestry is considering. And if this is an issue that you want to make sure goes in the right direction and goes along the lines of what you were just saying is needed, you can actually provide public comment on this. And I'm putting the link to the public comment right here. And you can go, and there's 40 slots a day that you can go and provide this input. So this is how you can pressure that entity. And if you're one of the folks that's affected by it, or you want to see policy go in the right direction, that's an opportunity. Thank you, Representative Uvati, for letting us know. But with all this stuff that we've just talked about, it's interesting because the liberal lamestream media at the national level is finally noticing that about half of the state of Oregon wants to leave. They want to go and join Idaho. And even though I think it's as a policy, it's unlikely to occur because of all the hoops they'd have to jump through to make it happen.
It's never going to happen.
It's pretty apparent, though, that is, as a protest movement, a sincere revulsion at being part of a state that doesn't care about it and actually has malign actors like the ones we just discussed trying to make it harder to even live in these places. That this is sincere feeling that people have, that they just don't feel like they need to be a part of the state of Oregon anymore. And it's interesting. So CBS Sunday Morning featured this story and went and talked to some people, and they're painting it as a nation divided. They're trying to make it look like a civil war. And, they're not entirely off on that one because there is an urban-rural divide. But there's also a red and blue divide that's occurring because they cited Staten Island in New York as being a relatively conservative part of New York City that basically doesn't want to be part of New York City anymore. That's not exactly rural area. And so, yeah, they want to secede from Oregon. I don't blame them for feeling this way after all the stuff we just talked about.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know why they'd want to go to Idaho, but Idaho will be Oregon in 5 years.
That's exactly it. That's the only really huge flaw in this whole idea, besides the fact that it politically it's unachievable, is that they'll just follow you there. They'll dumb down your kids and turn them into kids that can't do math and read, but they know their gender pronouns, and they know you're a bad person, apparently, for having opinions that differ from the official government approved opinion. And by the way, you're probably an insurrectionist, or you're trying to secede, and we're gonna have to bring out the big guns to take care of you.
Yeah, probably wear a MAGA hat. Vote for Trump. That's the way all you people are. Right? I mean, that's the way they think of us.
They do. And it's so funny. It's like them talking about, some third world yahoos somewhere in like the middle of Africa that are having, constant fights over nothing. And they talk about that about their fellow Americans that way now.
And we own most of the land.
That's right.
I mean, the land that isn't owned by the federal government in Oregon, we own most of it. We represent geographically, far, above the largest swath of Oregon. 99% of the people that live in Oregon don't live in Portland. Or I should say 99% of the area. 99% of Oregon is not part of the city of Portland, I guess is what I meant to say. So, Yeah, it's kind of weird. I would like to say to Marjorie. Marjorie asked the question: are they afraid of the environmentalists, the U.S. Forest Service? Yes, in fact, they are, Marjorie. Uh, some of you may or may not know, but I own a lot of mines, gold mines, and a copper mine. And a U.S. Forest Service ranger told me that if we approve your operations, they will sue us.
Yeah, and drain their budgets, right? To pay legal fees so that they won't
Yes.
have money and resources
Yes.
to do anything else.
So they're holding us hostage.
This can be fixed. It can be fixed in Congress. There has to be will.
Yes. It has to be, and there has to be. And again, it's the Forest Service is a part of the executive branch of the United States federal government, and it's up to the executive, the President of the United States, to make sure that they're serving the best needs. It's incumbent upon both the BLM and the United States Forest Service to make as much land available for natural resource harvesting as possible. That's actually in their policy. They are supposed to facilitate logging. They are supposed to facilitate mining and facilitate other higher uses of federal property. But they've been beat into submission by the environmentalists in their lawsuits.
Law schmaw. That's just laws are just there so that we can go after those MAGA people when they get a little uppity and out of control.
Well, speaking of which, it was more than one environmental agency just won a lawsuit repealing some Trump policy on logging that made it easier to log.
Yep, I saw that. That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a constant battle. It's taking place while the rest of us are busy having, jobs and family and holidays. There's a few other things that I think we want to mention before we finish up here. Oregonians, we've talked about this a number of times, have decided that they have had it with Measure 110 and drug decriminalization, with all the rising overdoses and the crime wave that it induced, as well as the mass homelessness, urban camping, and public use of heroin, meth, and fentanyl that apparently no one can actually do anything about now because it's totally decriminalized. Kevin Dahlgren, we both know him. He's been out drawing attention to this. He's a drug and alcohol counselor who's calling BS on these guys and saying that this is the product of that Measure 110 was the product of a radicalized social justice movement that gives a person a right to use these drugs known as bodily autonomy. And they say that he says that this is done to make sure that they could do this without any consequences. And they are doing this. That's what's happening to the state. But what was fascinating about this poll was not only the outright percentage of people, passed with 58% support in 2020, now 56% support a complete repeal. And hopefully that will happen. However, how many times have we heard that the reason why policies like this had to be put in place was because we had to help people of color, because of equity and wokeness and all that stuff? And I think
people of color kill themselves.
Well, here's what happened.
I mean, that's what it boils down to.
Yes, exactly. And who doesn't appreciate that? People of color. Turns out that
I can understand that.
Well, so here's what the poll said. That 2/3 of Hispanics or Latinos and African Americans want a full repeal of Measure 110, but just over half of white voters. Now, it's significant that it's half of white voters. That's the swing. But now we know that there's a bunch of white voters who are both stupid and also like virtue signaling when they're told that they're doing something that's good for blacks and Hispanics.
Yeah.
But they're helping blacks and Hispanics to death that are being affected by drug addiction.
They're helping them literally to death. And that kind of probably speaks to most of those white voters are, we know, Democrats or leftists in the state of Oregon. We know that very well because Republicans keep losing because we don't have the numbers. You can debate that all you want for other reasons, but that's really the reason why we lose. But yeah, they're helping them to death, and it looks like they want them to die. I mean, I don't understand why white Democrats in Oregon hate people of color so much. Why do they hate black people? Why do they hate brown people? Because they want them to die. Here's your fentanyl. We know that you're too stupid.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, you're too stupid to be productive. Obviously, we need to help you.
We're going to help you. Here's free access to fentanyl, and we've got the Narcan sitting here waiting here just to make sure we can bring it back as many times as possible as needed.
As many times as we need to. Yeah, you just don't worry about dosing. We'll take care of that for you on the other end with the Narcan. So if you go a little bit over, but yeah, it seems to be kind of a form of soft racism, if you will.
Very much so. And I will say that it's also led to a breakdown of our medical system and our mental health system. And I thought I'd mention that this guy who escaped the Oregon State Hospital last week, I believe it was, he was found, he's still shackled, found stuck in a muddy pond in Portland.
I heard about it.
He made it from Salem to Portland, and then was found buried up to his armpits in a pond in Portland.
Wow. Yeah.
He tried to give a fake name too when he was found. He tried to give a fake name. The
other thing, you mentioned all of the systems that are failing, but the criminal justice system is failing because even though it is no longer, it's decriminalized to use drugs, the crime that people commit while under the influence of drugs is no longer being prosecuted. In theory and in principle, I support the legalization of drugs. But the decriminalization of drugs, which is perfect for the drug dealer, because the drug dealer now has a customer that doesn't get thrown in jail and stops using for however long, and the dealing of the drugs is still against the law, so the profits are high. I mean, it just seems like Measure 110 was just made for drug cartels. Yeah. And so the decriminalization really doesn't work. I mean, if you made them legal, if the manufacture and distribution were regulated like it is, like under a microscope with marijuana in this state, then you would have fewer deaths, and you would have much less criminal activity. You probably still have the homelessness problem because people that do drugs all day long are not going to live in a house.
Well, and Measure 110, let's not forget, was sold to people as a tax on cannabis sales in order to fund drug treatment, which they still haven't actually gotten around to creating. Which means
cannabis sales tax receipts have plummeted about 30%. So.
Yeah, well, there's that too. I mean, it's just a shit show all around, or a Schmidt show. But while we're paying attention to all these other issues, overwhelmed with all the fentanyl streaming in here, we know where the fentanyl, the origin of the chemicals, is. We know that all these problems that are plaguing our country, which look largely self-inflicted, are happening. Meanwhile, Chinese nationals are celebrating Labor Day here in the United States by attempting entry to U.S. bases posing as tourists. And it turns out that the reason why they're doing this is because apparently they're going to get to report back to the Chinese Communist Party just how good our defenses at our bases are. Why would they be doing that, David?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that they might want to invade the United States of America. Now, I know that's a conspiracy theorist type thing, but that's kind of what I see. We know that Chinese nationals have been flowing across the southern border, and they are not poor people looking for a better life. They're military-age males. They seem to be well dressed, have plenty of money, And the other thing that I vetted, the story is actually true, is they're being given asylum at a rate 2 to 3 times higher than anyone else. It's like 58% of Chinese nationals are being granted asylum in the United States, as opposed to like 12 or 13% of other nationalities.
Yep. I don't know. Maybe Beijing Biden is helping with this process. I know that if he is actually making any decisions, then this must be one of them, or somebody that's controlling them. But here's what one of the sets of Chinese nationals that were found were crossing into a U.S. missile range in New Mexico to what appeared to be scuba divers swimming in murky waters near a U.S. government rocket launch site in Florida. So all I can say is, while we were busy with all these other things, someone else is planning to test our defenses. And if something happens in, say, the Taiwan Straits, don't be surprised if you aren't just watching that on TV, but noticing that our electrical systems and our communication systems, and that there's explosions happening in the United States because
There's Chinese tanks emerging from the Oregon coast.
yeah. Well, they're certainly going to take the war to us, and I don't even know if we think there is a war yet, but we better start paying attention.
Well, they have been checking our weather. They sent the weather balloons over, so they are concerned about our weather.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
And one other thing, I like to war game out, because I don't like to be caught with my pants down, so to speak. Oregon is the preferred invasion spot.
Yeah.
My
Oh, you froze up there, David. Well, until we get David back there, I think he's. Oh, there we go. Oh, I saw it for a second here. Well, I did want to mention before we wrap up here, tomorrow night, Aaron with Freedom Foundation, he's going to come on and talk about his new book, Freedom is the Foundation, and about the labor movement, which we're talking about today. And you can check him out tomorrow and bring your questions. We'll try to remember some of the questions you gave us today, because tomorrow we will get to fully discuss the effect of the labor movement in the United States and what is being done by the good folks at the Freedom Foundation. Did you want to finish that last point there, David, that you were making when it froze?
I'm not sure if I can. I think the Chinese are affecting my satellite.
Yes, well,
I was going to say that, my part of generally down in this part of Oregon is the farthest away that you can get from a military base on the west coast of the United States.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So if you want to land someplace and it's the farthest away from a military base, of course, they'll have already been bombed. But yeah. So.
Well, plus you'll find plenty of idiots willing to welcome them in, or fearing that they might be racist if they don't let the Chinese do exactly what they want to do.
Yeah, well, Lincoln City would be a great place for them to land, because there's plenty of people who will welcome them there and feed them.
On that note, happy rest of your Labor Day, David, and thanks for joining me here tonight. I appreciate it.
It was fun.
And don't forget, tomorrow night we'll be back with another episode of The Captive Audience. Aaron with Freedom Foundation. I'm Kevin Hoare, and we'll see you tomorrow night on The Captive Audience. Have a good one.